Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into it.
The car battery is designed mainly for starting the engine. Therefore, these batteries are called starter batteries. In addition to starting the engine by cranking the starter and further rotation of the crankshaft, the battery is responsible for powering all electrical consumers until the engine is started. In this case, the entire load is transferred to the alternator. In parallel, the alternator itself generates electricity during operation, part of which is transferred to the battery for recharging. This means that the generator can be used to compensate for the charge used to start the engine. In theory, the alternator should fully charge the battery during a trip. But in modern operating conditions, drivers spend most of their time in traffic jams, at traffic lights, and make short trips with frequent stops. It is not so often possible to drive 50 to 100 kilometers without stops. And it is under such conditions that the generator can restore the battery charge to almost 100%. Hence, a natural question arises as to whether the battery will be charged from the generator if the engine is idling. That is, when the engine is warming up, when stopping at traffic lights, or when in a large traffic jam. To understand whether the battery is charged at idle when the engine is running, it is necessary to answer several important questions. How the alternator works. The engine and generator are connected by a belt or chain drive. With its help, the revolutions of the internal combustion engine are transferred from the engine to the pulley of the generator. The generator is a converter. That is, when rotating, it converts mechanical energy into electrical energy. On the shaft of the generator fixed magnets and copper winding, which allows you to create an electric field, transferring the charge from the internal combustion engine to the generator. The latter gives part of the energy to recharge the battery. The battery does not regenerate its capacity all the time. The battery draws as much energy as it needs to operate. To prevent the alternator from constantly supplying power to the battery, the unit is designed with a voltage regulator. If the battery is constantly charged, it would lead to boiling of electrolyte and rapid failure of the entire electrical system of the car. Is the energy produced by the alternator sufficient? Another popular question concerns only whether the energy produced by the generator is enough to power all consumers. The performance and other characteristics of the unit are laid down by the manufacturer. All the relevant information is indicated on the housing and is also duplicated in the technical documentation. Calculation of the generator performance is done in such a way that it can produce the amount of energy that is necessary for the full functioning of the entire car and its systems, with a small reserve. Idle speed parameters, idle speed, are also individual for each car. The corresponding characteristics are laid down by the manufacturer. Some cars idle only 500 revolutions per minute. In others, these figures increase to 1500 RPM. How many rotations the crankshaft will make per unit of time depends on several factors. These include the injection system used, engine displacement, ambient temperature, the type of fuel injection used, engine power, general technical condition of the vehicle, etc. Depending on the number of crankshaft revolutions at idle speed, the generator generates a certain amount of electricity. The higher the revolutions, the more actively the shaft rotates, and the more electrical energy is converted from mechanical energy. What are the peculiarities of charging the battery at idle in winter? As you know, idling is the mode of operation of the engine without load. In this case, the voltage of the electrical system spends resources only to support all the necessary ongoing processes in the engine. Idling is used to warm up all working fluids and the motor itself, providing optimal conditions for the subsequent movement. Each car has its own characteristic indicators for the number of revolutions when working in the idling mode. If the parameters turn out to be higher or lower than the established norm, it indicates violations in the work and settings of the engine. Read also, why jams the engine and how to deal with it. It is legitimate to ask whether the battery will receive a charge in the winter. Period. When the internal combustion engine is running at idling. The principle of operation of the generator remains the same no matter what time of year it is or what the air temperature is. When starting the internal combustion engine, the generator will produce the same amount of energy. This makes it safe to say that even in winter the battery will be charged by the generator. But here it is important to emphasize that at low temperatures the starter battery is much worse at accepting a charge. As soon as the internal combustion engine reaches operating temperature and warms up, the transfer of charge from the generator to the battery will again occur at a normal level. How much energy is consumed by automotive equipment? With the charging of batteries at idle speed, it was possible to partially determine. Yes, the battery can indeed in this mode compensate for the lost charge due to the rotation of the alternator, which converts mechanical energy into electrical energy. It is not only because the engine has been started that the battery needs recharging. Charging becomes necessary also after giving part of the power to various automotive systems that operate when the engine is not running, as well as after starting the engine. In terms of the amount of energy consumed, the following figures can be distinguished when turning on the parking lights and backlights. In the car, about 40 watts of power will be required from the onboard power supply. When the head optics, headlights, and fog lights are working, the car will draw about 250 watts. If you turn on the cabin heating at maximum speed, then about 200 watts will be required. From the mains, if the cooling fan works for a short time, another 250 watts are needed. 150 watts will be taken from the electrical system to warm up the rear window. The engine management system and the fuel pump take up to 80 watts in total. Listening to music in the car at an average volume level requires 100 watts. In total, you get 1,000 to 1,100 watts. If you convert watts to amps by dividing this value by 12, you get about 90 amps. This is quite a lot even for a generator. When he himself cannot cope with such a load, the battery itself comes into play. As a result, it turns out that sometimes the battery is not charged and even gives up part of its charge, although the engine is already running. That's why a proper calculation of the capacity and performance of the battery and alternator plays such a big role in the design of any car. Parameters of alternator capacity. Generator power is the ratio between the work performed by the node and the time during which it performs its tasks. In order to recharge the battery, the alternator must provide the necessary voltage and current for a certain period of time. Most passenger cars use alternators with a capacity of about 1 kilowatt. But situations vary. In addition to performance, a huge role is played by how many consumers and how powerful they are provided on a particular vehicle. After all, one car may have an ordinary stove and a simple audio system with a radio. Other cars have climate control, multimedia complex, audio system with subwoofer and amplifier. It turns out that in the first case there are minimum consumers, and therefore the generator, even at the kaka, will be able to give the necessary voltage to recharge the battery without problems. In the second case, the alternator may not be able to cope with the load. Then the battery is not charged, or even gives up part of its charge to help the alternator. Read also what you need to know about resellers and how to start your own business on it. Therefore, the characteristics of the battery and alternator are selected individually for each car, based on its capacity, consumers, etc. Even within the same model, different combinations of alternator and battery can be used. In order for the alternator to work stably and efficiently, satisfying all the demands of the existing consumers, it must have a certain power reserve. If you put additional equipment on the car, for which the standard generator and battery are not designed, it can lead to serious problems. The system will not have enough resources to supply all consumers. Now, specifically to the question of whether the car battery is charged from the engine, i.e., from the generator at idle speed. Is it possible to charge the battery at idle speed? There is a huge number of disputes and conversations about whether the car battery is charged at idle speed. On this account, opinions differ. There are two positions. Some are sure that charging occurs only when the wheels are rotating. The position of others is based on the fact that recharging at idle will definitely occur. Based on all the previous data, we can answer whether the battery is charging when the engine is running at idle speed. Yes, when the engine is running at idling speed, the battery is charged. This is due to the fact that the alternator is directly connected to the crankshaft. They function together with the engine running. It does not matter whether it is idling or active driving with wheels turning. In any case, there is a generation of mechanical energy, which is converted by the generator into electrical energy. The energy is then transferred to consumers. If there is a deficit of capacity in the battery, which is determined by special sensors, the voltage relay opens the transfer of charging to the battery, and part of the generated energy goes to restore the characteristics of the battery. Another question is how long it takes to charge a car battery at idle. It is not possible to answer this question accurately. This is due to the fact that different generators are used on different cars and cars differ in the number and parameters of the consumers themselves. It is potentially possible to calculate how much a particular battery of a certain car is charged when the engine is idling. If the battery is not badly discharged and additional consumers are not switched on, the recharging will happen quite quickly. But if the battery is badly discharged and the alternator is powering other systems in parallel, it will take much longer to recharge the battery. It has already been determined whether the car battery is recharged when the engine is idling. The battery can indeed compensate for the lost charge, but this requires a different amount of time, depending on the specific situation. Under ideal conditions, the charging time can be calculated by dividing the required amount of energy, by the free current. Free current is the current that is not used to power additional consumers, headlights, heating, air conditioning, etc. The more free current, the less time will be spent on recharging. But this does not take into account corrections for temperature, specific engine speeds, etc. Because of the large number of unknowns, it is impossible to make accurate calculations. In order to accelerate the charging of the battery, it is necessary to disconnect as many consumers as possible at idle speed. Of course, if you turn off all additional systems and drive some distance, it will allow you to charge the battery much faster than when the engine is running at idle speed. After all, the higher the crankshaft speed, the more mechanical energy is produced, and the more electricity the generator can convert. In conclusion, while the engine is idling, the battery does receive some charge, but it is significantly less efficient compared to when the engine is running at higher RPMs. Idling can help maintain the battery's charge, but it is not a reliable method for recharging a depleted battery. For optimal battery health, it's best to drive the vehicle regularly or use a dedicated charger when needed. Understanding this can help you make informed decisions about your vehicle's maintenance and battery care. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more insights on automotive topics.